picking up somewhere about where we left off. Um, Beowulf and his men return home. This is F21, okay, bottom of page 109 through 111. They arrive back at the land of the Geats and such, and we get a little digression about Hig's father and Hig's ancestors and this stuff about this person who may or may not be named Modthrift. We don't really know. You've got a long kind of footnote about it. In F28, Beowulf's arrival is told to Helac beginning 1970 and following. Sorry, I've got some wrong up here. That should be there. That should be there. And we're told, line 1987, Helac asks Beowulf. Now bear in mind, Helac is Beowulf's uncle, all right, and king. How did you fare, beloved Beowulf, in your journey when you suddenly resolved to seek a far-off strife over the salt sea of battle in Herat? Did you better at all the well-known woe of Hrothgar, the famous prince? For that I see with heart care and distress, mistrusted the adventure of my beloved man. Long I implored that you not seek that slaughter spirit at all. Let the South Danes themselves make war against God. Against Grendel, sorry. Now, what did Beowulf say when he arrived at the land of the Danes?
All the wise men were encouraging him.
All the wise men said, yeah, Beowulf, go, you can do this. The poet says that essentially. In here now, we have Helac say, I was filled with great heart sorrow. That is, man, I was really disturbed that you went off to do this. I said, let Hrothgar deal with his own problems. Okay? Part of the reason for that probably is because what Hrothgar said just before Beowulf and his men left, you know, when he alluded to the previous strife between the Danes and the Geats. All right? So Beowulf says, it's no mystery to many men, my lord Helac, a great meeting, what a time of great struggle, blah, blah, blah. What does it mean it's no mystery? Come on, you've been on CNN. You've seen, you've heard. The stories have preceded Beowulf is kind of suggesting. Okay? I avenged them all so that none of Grendel's tribe needs to boast anywhere, blah, blah, blah. He says, I came to the ring hall, I greeted Hrothgar, the famous kinsman of Halfdane, the troop was in delight. He talks about the queen would come out and dispense, you know, drink and treasure and such. And then he mentions line 2020. At times before the hall things, the daughter of Hrothgar came forth. Did we see that? Did we see Freywaru at all? Nope. Wasn't mentioned one lick, right? And then he goes on and tells us a story. And most scholars think we're meant to take this story as being true, right? Freywaru has been given in marriage to ENGL, a son of Froda, right? Who is a prince of the Heathobards. And the reason she's been given in marriage to him is to bring peace between these two warring tribes. She's called a peace weaver. She is supposed to weave peace between them, not by any action, but simply by being married to the prince of their enemy, right? And Beowulf tells us what's going to happen as a result, how this marriage is not going to bring peace. Because he says, line 2029, seldom anywhere after the death of a prince does the deadly spear rest for even a brief while, though the bride be good. And I think that's Beowulf telling Helac, but it's also the poet telling his audience, right? attempt at bringing peace through a dynastic marriage isn't going to work. Those dynastic marriages went on not only in Anglo-Saxon times, they went on up through the 20th century, early 20th century. It was thought, for example, that something like the quote-unquote Great War, World War I, could never happen. Why? Because by that point, all the houses of Europe, the royal houses, were intermarried. And it was thought, well, they're not going to go to war against each other because that's your brother, it's your cousin, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of good that did. Okay? So, Beowulf gives a scenario of what's going to happen in the Heathobardish kingdom. So, notice, Fremoru goes off to live with her husband, and she has a retinue of followers. She has her own set of retainers. Where have we seen this picture before? Or this movie before? The Finsburg episode. When Hildebert went off to live with her husband, Finn, okay, and she had retainers, and then her brother Knaf comes to visit, and hostility is renewed, etc., etc. Okay? So, we're going to be told, line 2041. So they're having a big feast, and an old spear bearer speaks over his beer. It means he's had one too many. Who sees that Ringhild and remembers all the spear deaths of men. He sees what Ringhild? Back up to 2035. So following Fremoru on the floor goes a young Danish nobleman who is decked out. On him glitters an ancestral heirloom, hard, ring-adorned, once a Heathobard treasure as long as they were able to wield their weapons. That is, it belonged to a Heathobard warrior. When that Heathobard and the others who died also were still able to wield those weapons. In other words, this is the spoils of war. This guy has it because it was given to him by his father, who probably fought in that last war against the Heathobards, won this as spoils of war, and now he's passed it down to his son. And now, back to the image Beowulf tells us. Now there's an old warrior sitting at the table who sees this young popinjay, this young stud, walk across the floor, and he's wearing this gear, and the old guy recognizes the gear. And he says to a young Heathobard warrior sitting next to him, "Can you, my friend, recognize that sword which your father bore into battle?" He doesn't really need to say anything else, does he? He's just said, "That's your daddy's sword." You going to let him do that? Because what is he suggesting the young Danish warrior is doing? He is strutting. He is saying, "Look at me. We defeated you. I am wearing this old Heathobard, war gear as a sign of our supremacy. Can you, my friend, recognize that sword which your father bore into battle in his final adventure beneath the helmet? That dear iron, when the Danes struck him, ruled the field of slaughter after the rout of heroes, when Withergild fell, those valiant shieldings? Now here some son or other of his slayer walks across this floor. Some son or other of his slayer." What's the old Heathobard warrior doing? What's he appealing to? The Germanic fourfold ethic. Duty to kin. Duty to avenge one's kin. He struts in his finery, brags of the murder, bears that treasure which ought by right to belong to you. He urges and reminds him on every occasion with cruel words until the time comes that for everyone who's paying for his father's deeds. Notice, it's not because of anything this kid has done. It's because of what his father did. Until he what? He sleeps, blood staining from the edge of a sword. In other words, one too many times, and this is entirely because this is what he wants to happen, the old warrior says to the young warrior, get up. Go get him. Go reclaim what is your birthright. And the young warrior finally has enough, and he goes and slays the Danish warrior. From there, the Heathobard warrior who slew the Danish warrior escapes alive, for he knows the land well. Then on both sides, the sworn oaths of earls will be broken. Remember earlier we were told that in Heorot, each was true to the other. They had sworn oaths to each other. What is Beowulf saying? Those oaths are worth what? Not their, kind of their weight in gold. Because oaths weigh how much? 0. It doesn't take much to break an oath. So what will happen? Thus I expect the Heathobard's part in the Danish alliance is not without deceit, nor their friendship fast. And he goes, oh, but you wanted to know about Grendel. Let me tell you about Grendel. And he goes back to the main story. So why this little, what's called digression? What's at the heart of it? Feud. The opening up of a sore, and that sore never gets healed. Okay? So he comes back to Grendel, and he mentions Honshu being the guy who got killed, who wasn't named earlier, and how Grendel grabbed Honshu and stuck him in his glove, Glof, pronounced glove. Honshu, hand, glove, stuck the glove in the glove. And then he says, it was too long for me to tell everything that happened, but I killed Grendel. He killed Grendel's mother. Talks about Asherah. Fit 31. So that nation's king followed good customs, and no wise have I lost those rewards. That is, he gave me all kinds of treasure. And then what does Beowulf do? It's all yours. Why? Because Beowulf doesn't make a claim for it for himself. He was fighting, he's suggesting, on Hielik's behalf. Because he's not his, so to speak, own man. He is in thrall, if you want. He is a liege to somebody else, or in liege to somebody else. Okay? So he orders all the stuff to be brought in, right? He gives the necklace to Hygd. The necklace that Wealhtheow gives him, notice he bestows on another woman. A woman gave it to him. He gives it to another woman. For some reason, we're not told why, Hielik wears that ring, that neck ring, that necklace, in his Frisian raid. Okay? So we're told, 2177. So the son of Ecgtheow showed himself brave, renowned for battles and noble deeds, pursued honor, by no means slew, drunken, his hearth companions. What were we told about Hermod? He did, drunken, slay his hearth companions. Okay? He had no savage heart, but the great gift which God had given him. The greatest might of all mankind, he held brave in battle. And then the poet says this, and again, it's the poet, it's the narrator, so it's meant to be taken at face value. He had been long despised, as the sons of the Geats considered him no good, nor did the lord of the waiters wish to bestow many good things upon him on the mead benches, for they assumed that he was slothful, a cowardly nobleman. Now, skip the next line and a half for a moment, and look at your footnote. The reasons for ascribing to the hero an unpromising youth, elsewhere not mentioned, are not clear. Are they? Are they not clear?
John Jordan.
What is the poet saying? Because look at the next line and a half now. Reversal came to the glorious man for all his griefs. What's meant by reversal? It's that idea that I said, is wound up centrally to the entire poem. It's in those lines that a lot of critics say, oh, those were added later by a Christian. It's the idea of change. Okay? That nothing is frozen, nothing is destined, nothing is fated. Okay? They all looked at Beowulf, we're told, as a youth, and the word that's actually used, considered him no good, they thought he was a slacker. Okay? And what have we been told? In his youth, he did what? Beowulf talks, in the response to Unferth. Not only did he do the swimming contest with Breca, but he slew a tribe of giants. He slew other monsters, etc., etc. Okay? And then we get 2190. Helek has brought in treasure that he gives to Beowulf. Okay? He gives him, for example, the heirloom of Hrevel, adorned with gold. Among the Geats, there was no finer treasure in the form of a sword. Well, Hrothgar gave him a sword. He gave him the sword of Halfdane, the head of the Danish line. Now, Helek has given him Hrevel's sword. All right? And we're told they not literally, equally, rule the Geats. How is Helek held in more honor? Well, he's the king and he has more property. All right? And then we get line 2200. And look what happens within 10 lines. It came to pass amid the crash of battle in later days, after Helek lay dead, and for Hardred the swords of battle held deadly slaughter under the shield wall, when the battle shielding sought him out, those hardy soldiers savagely struck down the nephew of Hereric and his victorious nation. Then came the broad kingdom into Beowulf's hands. That is 8 lines. He held it well for 50 winters. That's 9 lines. So Beowulf comes from just returning to the land of the Geats to 50 years go by. More than 50 years go by. Okay? Beowulf rules for 50 years. After however long Helek remains king and however long Hardred is king. Because we're never told those dates or those numbers. Until in the dark night the dragon began his reign, he guarded his hoard in the high hearth, the steep stone barrows, the path below lay unknown to men, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, 10 lines. We go from Beowulf, essentially in his 2 fights with the Grendelkin, to a new monster, and it's now 50 years later. This is one of the areas that some critics suggest, these are clearly 2 different stories. Beowulf against the Grendelkin, the race of Grendels, if you want, is one story, and Beowulf against the dragon is another story. And it's at this point in the manuscript that contains this poem, it's at this point that you have a page that the ink has been scraped off at one point. According to a scholar I mentioned one day in class, Kevin Kiernan. Okay. And Kiernan argues that this page is what's called
John Jordan.
Yes, I know. I can't answer. Stop. It's a palimpsest. A palimpsest is when you have a page and you erase it so that you can write back over it. Right? A lot of manuscripts of ancient material are exactly this kind of thing. For example, Archimedes, the ancient Greek geometer, I think it is, geometrician. The earliest known manuscript for his stuff, if I remember correctly, dates from the 10th century, like 1000 AD. But it's a manuscript that has been copied over. So what was originally there has been scraped off, the Archimedes stuff, and the manuscript was reused for other stuff, right? Another one of these was just discovered. Oh, sheesh. Like in the last year, and it's a Merlin, like Merlin, King Arthur. It's a Merlin story, and it's a manuscript from 11 or 1200s that had one text on it, and they've looked at it through different kinds of light, different kind of camera technology, and it turns out that one text is written over another text, and the other text is a Merlin story, right? So what Kiernan argues is that on this page in the manuscript where the dragon and Beowulf's 50-year reign is first introduced, there was something originally there that's no longer there. And we can't read what was there. We can read parts of it through certain kinds of photography and such. But what we have is the beginning of the dragon story. And one of the reasons he argues it's a palimpsest is a lot of the letters are missing. Okay? The page was scraped clean. It's vellum, it's hide, not paper. It was scraped clean, and the new text was written over while it was still damp. And the ink didn't soak into the hide fibers. And some of the letters fell off, right? So, Brit Kiernan essentially arguing two different stories get patched together right here. That's why he argues this Beowulf that we have in the manuscript is the only this Beowulf that has ever existed. There was never a time prior to this manuscript, he essentially suggests, where somebody, 50 years previous, somebody sat down and heard the story of Beowulf, and they heard the story of Beowulf that we have here. What they heard was Beowulf and the Grendelkin or Beowulf and the Dragon. They didn't hear the whole thing together, right? So, what happens? Fit 32. We're told a thief sneaks into the dragon's hoard and steals a cup. That, by the way, is the source for J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, okay? Where Bilbo takes something. And there's all kinds of treasure in there, we're told. Line 2236. In earlier times, death had seized them all. And he who still survived, alone from the nation's army, lingered there a mournful century, expected the same, that he might enjoy those ancient treasures for just a little while. Okay? Who's being talked about? This noble race that a long time ago lived, and one guy of this people is left alive. It's almost like it's the wonder. Okay? And this person has apparently only a few days, months, maybe years to live, to enjoy the treasures. 2241, a waiting barrow stood in an open field near the ocean waves, new on the cape, safely with crafty narrow entrances. He bore within the noble wealth. So somebody had built a new burial mound with a narrow entrance, a little passageway to get in, and this person, this is called usually, where can I write this? The lay of the last survivor. Like in the book of Job, bad things happen to Job's children's, servants, etc. And you always have one person who survives and goes off to Job and says, "And I alone am escaped to tell thee," etc., etc. It's kind of like with Moby Dick, same kind of thing. So this one person puts all the gold in the barrel, and then he sings this song, the lay. Hold now, 2247, O thou earth, for heroes cannot the wealth of men. Hold earth, the grave. The wealth of men, all these treasures. Why? Because men can't. Why can't they? They're all dead. Right? Notice the speaker here, this last survivor, is making a comment about human life. Lo, from you long ago, those good ones first obtained it. In other words, the wealth is going where? Back from whence it came. What does God tell Adam in Genesis is going to happen to Adam after Adam eats of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Before he says, when you eat of it, you shall surely die. After he eats of it, he says, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. The treasure came out of the earth, and the speaker says, and it's going to go back to the earth. Death and war and awful deadly harm have swept away all of my people who have passed from life and left the joyful hall. Now have I none to bear the sword or burnish the bright cup, the precious vessel. All that host has fled. He doesn't use, where quam, the ubi sunt language, but it's an ubi sunt kind of motif here. Now must the hardened helm of hammered gold be stripped of all its trim. The steward sleep who should have tended to this battle mask. So too this warrior's coat, which waited once the bite of iron over the crack of boards, molders like its owner. That is, it rots like its owner. The coat of mail cannot travel widely with the war chief beside the heroes. Harp joy have I none, no happy song. Nor does the well-schooled harp. He's talking about what? All the joys of the hall. They're gone. Death has taken everything. So grieving, he, back up. 2265b. Savage butchery has sent forth many of the race of men. And that's probably litotes. What do you mean by many of the race of men? All. What have this race of men, and what do we see in the novel? Most of these races of men, meaning tribes, peoples, nationalities, what do they tend to fight over? Are they fighting for the big ideas? Truth, justice, honor, loyalty, love? No. They're fighting for what? Stuff. Shield Sheving does what? He deprives his neighboring tribes of their mead benches. That is, he takes their territory. Okay? So grieving, he mourned his sorrow, alone after all. See? That's what the feud gets you. One man standing. Unhappy, sped both days and nights until the flood of death broke upon his heart. So he dies, and then we're told 2270, an old beast of the dawn found that shining hoard standing open. He who burning seeks the barrows, a fierce and naked dragon who flies by night in a pillar of fire, people blah, blah, blah. It is his nature to find a hoard in the earth. The poet is telling us, this is what dragons do, period. He's not saying this dragon is evil. This dragon is not, contrary to what some critics suggest, symbolic of Satan. The dragon is not necessarily symbolic of avarice. This is just what dragons do. Okay? They find hoards. And then what do they do with the hoard? Like your dog, they walk around 3 or 4 times to get comfortable, lay down, and go to sleep. And then what do? They stay asleep. That's it. Dragons just sleep on hoards of treasure until something wakes them. That's why you never tickle a sleeping dragon, Hogwarts motto. It is his nature to find a hoard in the earth where ancient and proud, that's the dragon, He guards heathen gold. And there's that word heathen again. Heathen can only be used in the context of Christian. Heathen gold, though it does him no good. How does the gold do the dragon no good? It's probably why it's called heathen gold, or it's at least associated with why it's called heathen gold. Does he buy anything with it? Does he distribute it in any way? No. No. The poet is saying gold has one positive purpose: to be given away, to be distributed. That's why a lord or king is often called a gold friend. It's the friend who gives gold. Okay? And we're told the dragon slept for 300 years. 300 winters. That threat to the people held in the ground his great treasury, until one man made him boil with fury. One man came and took one little cup. See, the dragon, once it finds a hoard and falls asleep on it, it knows every piece of that. You take one little thing, and the inner accountant, comes out. So, the dragon came out. Well, let me back up. Why did the guy steal the cup? 2281. He bore to his liege lord the plated cup, begged for peace. He was trying to use the cup, the gold, the person who stole it, to buy peace from his lord. Right? The guy was in trouble, in other words. The dragon came out. Strife was renewed, we're told. And we're told 2291. Thus can an undoomed man easily survive rack and ruin if he holds to the ruler's grace and protection. The horde guardian searched along the ground, greedy to find the man. And what did he do? He soon discovered some man had disturbed his gold, his great wealth. So if you have an image of, the barrow is here. The dragon comes out, and it's kind of implied what the dragon does in its search for the treasure is it kind of does this. It goes wider and wider and wider, and what's it doing the whole time it's flying? It's burning everything. It just torches the whole countryside. Okay? Included in that countryside is Beowulf's own house. That's not necessarily the hall with the throne. It's Beowulf's personal home. It'd be like Joe Biden's house in Delaware, as opposed to the White House, And we're told, bottom of page 115, 2230, 1, 2, 3, 4. To Beowulf the news was quickly brought of that horror that his own home, best of buildings, had burned in waves. To the good man that was painful in spirit, greatest of sorrows, the wise one believed he had bitterly offended the ruler of all, the eternal Lord, against the old law. His breast within groaned with dark thoughts. That was not his custom. See, when Grendel first comes, what are we told about Hrothgar? Are we told anything like this? That Hrothgar thinks he's offended God? No. All we're told that Hrothgar does is he sits and mourns. Like, this will never get any better. And for 12 days, 12 years, he sits and mourns. Beowulf thinks, I've somehow offended God. How is it put? He has offended the ruler of all, the ruler against the old law. He's done something morally wrong. Right? And he's full of dark thoughts, which was not his custom. What have we seen as Beowulf's custom prior to this? First two monster fights. Or even in the swimming contest, what he relates of the battles against the sea monsters. You got a problem? Deal with it. You know, Asherah winds up dead the morning after. What does he say? Sorrow not, wise man. It's better to avenge one's friend than to mourn over much. In other words, get up and do something. Now, he's full of these dark. He's not full of this, let's go kick some dragon, you know what. Right? But, we're told, after a few lines, he does tell his people, make me a shield. And a lot of people see possibly an allusion or connection to the Iliad, where Achilles' shield is described as being made in these few lines. Right? I don't see it, but that's fine. So he says, make me a shield, and it's going to be made of what? Metal. He's going to fight a fire-breathing dragon. You can't make the shield of wood and cowhide, oxhide, as most shields were made of. All right? So we're told, 23:45. No, let me back up. 23:41. The long good nobleman had to endure the end of his Lanadius, his lone days, this world's life. And so did the worm. Now we're at line 23, 42, 43. There are 3,182 lines in the poem, so we're about 2/3 of the way through. And the poet just told us what? Beowulf's going to die. He had to endure the end of his life's days. Okay? And the dragon's going to die too. So we're being told 2/3 of the way through the poem, Beowulf and the dragon are both going to die. Whatever happened to suspense? Well, they didn't understand that idea of suspense like we do. For them, it was partly the working out how Beowulf is going to die that, created the desire to hear the rest of the story, so to speak. All right? So we're told Beowulf decides to seek out the dragon. But not, notice he scorned to seek out with a full force of men. He's not going out with his full army. He did not dread that attack, nor did he worry much about the dragon's warfare, his strength or valor, because he had survived many battles. We're told, what does Beowulf think when he plans to go fight the dragon? I don't need a big army. Why not? Because I'm Beowulf. What's he have on his business card? Beowulf, comma, monster killer. Monster killer. I'll take care of it. I'll have a few men go with me. It was not the least of hand-to-hand battles, 23:54, when Hygelac was slain. Second reference to Hygelac's Frisian raid. Right? And how Beowulf escaped from there, 23:59. Beowulf escaped from there through his own strength, took a long swim. He had in his arms the battle armor of 30 men when he climbed to the cliffs. Okay, so he swam across the Baltic Sea with the armor of 30 men. Now, this isn't like 30, suits of armor like you would see in the British, at the Tower of London or something, big, heavy sheet steel kind of. This is, ring mail coat, probably nothing for the arms, right? But still, go to the, Tower of London sometime, do a tour, and put on one of the sample coats of mail you can put on, or a shirt of mail. It's a good 40, 50 pounds. Try swimming with that. A few hundred miles. So we're told Beowulf survived that battle. Okay. The son of Ecgtheow crossed the vast sea, top of the next column, wretched, solitary, returned to his people, And Hig offers him the horde and kingdom. Why? Helak's dead. Beowulf is the only one to survive this battle. All right? Helak's dead. Why doesn't his son, Hardred, here, why doesn't he become king? Because he's too young, we're told. She did not trust, 2370, that her son could hold the ancestral seat against foreign hosts now that Helak was dead. Despite their misery, by no means could they prevail upon that prince at all that he should become lord over Hardred or choose to rule the kingdom. That implies it's not just Hig who asks. It's the quote-unquote wise men who say, come on, Beowulf, you should. And Beowulf, no. Why? It's not right. It's not right. He's not within the line of kingship yet. So what does he do? Hardred sits on the throne, put a couple cushions under him to make him look bigger, and Beowulf just kind of stands behind him and flexes. Because everybody surrounding knows you got to get through Beowulf to get to Hardred, right? And then we get this little allusion. 2379. Wretched exiles, the sons of Othra, sought him out across the seas. They had rebelled against the Sylvings ruler, the best of all sea kings, who dispensed treasure in the sweetest lands, a famous king. Okay? That's what all of this is about up here. So, ENGL was the king of the Swedes, right? He had two sons, Othra and Onela. Othra had two sons, Aemon and Eödils. Onela's war leader was a man named Weston. He had a son later named Wilof, right? Over here, the Hrevlings, these are the Geats. 4 children, 3 boys, 1 girl, just like with the Danes. Okay, you had Halfdane, Harogar, Halaga, Hrothgar, unnamed daughter. Right? The unnamed daughter marries a person that produces Hrolf. That's why Hrolf is the nephew. Right? So Heribald, Halfdane, Helak marries Hig, and then Yolanda's sister who marries Echdale. They produce Beowulf. So what are we being told here? These wretched exiles are Aemon and Eödils. They seek refuge from Hardred. Well, Beowulf is standing behind the throne flexing. Why do they seek refuge? The poet says, because they had rebelled against Onela, the king. All right? How did he become king? See, it's not spelled out in Beowulf. In other sources, it's implied Onela kills his brother, Othra, who's next in line. Kills his brother and takes the kingship. Okay? So when Othra dies, who should be king? His eldest son, Eamund. So when Uncle Onela kills Dad, they flee over here. Right? Hardred gives them refuge. And what happens? Onela then attacks. Okay? He attacks and kills Hardred. Right? And Weston kills Eamund in that attack. Right? So now you have Beowulf left alive and Eödil left alive. So we're told that cost him his life, 2384. The hymn, it's Hardred. Hardred gave Aemon and Eödil's refuge. That cost him his life. Okay? For his hospitality, he took a mortal hurt with the stroke of a sword, that son of Helak. And the son of Onyentheow, Onela, afterwards went back home. Once Hardred lay dead, And here's the problem with the passage, at least the way I read it. I brought this up, over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, on what's called ANSACS, International Listserv of Anglo-Saxon Scholars. And you would think I had said the Pope was Jewish or something to a conference of Catholics. I mean, people came out of the woodwork saying that I was a nasty, mean person. And let Beowulf hold the high throne. And the Old English verb there is let. What does it mean to let someone do something? If you let someone do something, who has all the power? The person doing the letting. Because let means to give permission to allow to. So, Onla goes back to the land of the Swedes only after doing what? Only after allowing Beowulf to hold the throne of the Geats. That really means the throne of the Geats is in the power of Onla. It's like, and what I suggested was, Beowulf was kind of like a puppet king. And, it's like, you can't say that about Beowulf. I mean, he's a hero. He's a monster slayer. He's the greatest thing since sliced cheese, the whole 9 yards. All right? Fourfold Germanic ethic. Duty to one's lord. Duty to one's kin. What's the third? Duty to avenge one's lord and kin. Why did Beowulf let's use that verb, Onla go home? He's freaking Beowulf. He should be able to kill Onla. Why didn't he? That's a question a lot of Beowulf scholars do not want to address because it raises questions about not only the character Beowulf's heroism, but the ideal of heroism that the poem is supposedly advocating. Okay? He let Beowulf hold the high throne and rule the Geats. That was a good king. This phrase, that was good king, is used 3 times in the poem. Twice, it's just like that, right? And the third time, it begins with ak, which means but. In the third time, it's referring to, it's actually the second time in the poem, it's referring to Hrothgar. Okay? The first time it's used is the very beginning, and it's describing shield shedding. Okay? That opening 7 or 8 lines. It says, "Fat was gold king." Why does it say that? Because he's the one who denied his neighbors of their meat benches. He's the one who expanded his kingdom. He's the one who demanded tribute, the whole 9 yards. That was a good king. When it's described about Hrothgar, it's after Beowulf kills Grendel. In the men are riding back from Grendel's mere, and they're singing Beowulf's praise, and they said we kind of remember Hrothgar, and we get, that was good king. But Hrothgar's a good king, too, kind of implied. That's undercutting, right? Here it's used. Some scholars think it's referring to Beowulf, because Beowulf is the thing referred to immediately before that. Some of us think, no, it's not. It's referring to Onla. Because what is Onla doing? He's taking charge. Look at how this whole passage kind of begins. Go back to line. They had rebelled against 2381, the best of all, they had rebelled against the Shilving's ruler, the best of all the sea kings. Okay. And then it ends with that, there's no A, by the way. It's that was good king. We throw in the A because we need the determiner. All right? Poet seems to be pretty clear, to me at least. He's speaking about Onla. Okay. Fit 34. In later days, he did not forget get that prince's fall. He, Beowulf, that prince's hardens. Meaning, Beowulf gets his vengeance. He befriended Eengils, right? Because Aemon is dead. He befriended Eengils how? He helped Eengils get his vengeance on Orla. Okay? And thus become what? King of the Swedes. Okay, so when all this stuff's kind of done, Hardred's dead, Helak's dead, who's king of the Geats? Where is he? Beowulf. All right? So he's king of the Geats. Who becomes king after Beowulf? Wiglaf. Who's Wiglaf? Son of Weston. Why is that important? Who'd Weston kill? Anmund. Who's Anmund? Brother of Eengils. Who's Eengils? Current king of the Swedes. Okay? Who's now, after Beowulf dies, jumping ahead, who's now king of the Geats? Wiglaf. What is Eengils to Wiglaf, or Wiglaf to Eengils? Go back to Beowulf's little story about Freymor'u and ENGL. Wiglaf is the son of Eengils' brother. Brother's killer. Wiglaf has Aemund's armor. Because we're told Weston bestows it to him. I think the reason Beowulf tells us that little digression about Freymor'u is because the poet is setting up what is going to happen at the end. Because we can jump to the end. You know, we get the dragon fight, the whole 9 yards. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. But what happens at the end? Beowulf is dead. Wiglaf is king of the Geats. Eengils is king of the Swedes. And a messenger is going to tell us a story. Once word gets out that Beowulf is dead, what's going to happen? Strife, to use a phrase, will be renewed. Because Eengils won't have to worry about the Beowulf problem. And he's going to want what? Revenge. On whom? Wiglaf. Why? Did Wiglaf ever do anything personally against Eengils? No, he didn't. But his father killed his brother. And that's enough. Duty to one's kin. Okay? Where does that mentality lead you? Go back to the lay of the last survivor. One person left standing. And what kind of life does he live? He goes and he crawls upon the horde and dies. That's what this Germanic mentality got him. Okay, we'll stop there, and we're going to pick up on Fit 34. And we'll probably finish on Wednesday.